This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome into the latest edition, a fresh edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Episode number 24 it is now. Doc alongside me today, Mr. John Macron, the godfather of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, in my opinion at least, as I said last week too, on episode number 23 of the pod. And I am your host, Vito Chirco, signing on today to discuss plenty of Hall of Fame news and notes. The Major League Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2016 was announced last week. Two guys made it in. I knew one for sure, Ken Griffey Jr. We all knew that. But Mike Piazza making it in. And Ken Griffey missing out on the unanimous vote by 3 votes. Who the heck? Who in their right mind left him off their ballot? 3 guys did, Doc. Very disappointing in my opinion that 3 guys left him off their ballot.
Vito, good afternoon. It's a great Tuesday. We all made it safely. We avoided all the headaches on the roads. I'm looking forward to it. Now, first, before I get to your point, I want to make a clarification. I'm a big fan of other podcasts, some of the big name podcasts that I do listen to regularly. I'd like to be known as the Podfather.
The Podfather. There we go. Good play on words.
You like that?
You deserve that.
I can't take credit for it. Adam Carolla, his fans call him the Podfather, but I like that. If you'd like to refer to me with those glowing terms, which is very flattering. I'm not going to lie. I do like it. Keep it coming, but you can refer to me as the Podfather.
But if Carolla already has it, we want to be original. We want to be unique and stand out. Or you don't? I guess you don't care about that, huh, Doc?
Nope,
okay, so the Podfather, John Macron, alongside me today. No Dominic Chirco sitting in front of me across the table. He's in school at UDM. He is studying, what is it again? Political science. Keep forgetting, almost say social science. It's political science. He's a sophomore. He's busy there today as the semester, for the winter semester, has started at UDM.
Well, Vito, in terms of the baseball writers, I guess there's just this, kind of norm or kind of expectation that nobody should be voted unanimously into the Baseball Hall of Fame. So the baseball writers are very particular. So that, even if it's an all-time great player that surpasses everything is going to be very tough to get unanimously voted in. And so the writers do it. And so, in the end, though, Ken Griffey was voted in as one of the highest, percentages in terms of, in terms of the percentages of the baseball writers. So it doesn't take away the accolades. It's nice to say that you got voted in unanimously by everybody, but it's just not likely to happen. So I don't take too much stock into it. It doesn't take away his statue and his bust that they're going to create. So Ken Griffey is a Hall of Famer. He deserved it. He deserved to be, put up there in such esteem. And like you guys said, the first number 1 overall pick, and now the first number 1 overall pick to be entered into the Hall of Fame. So it's a very nice accolade for him.
And the lowest round of the Major League Baseball amateur draft player as well to be elected into the Hall of Fame in catcher Mike Piazza. 62nd rounder and then the number 1 overall pick in Ken Griffey Jr. of the Seattle M's. He played with his dad. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. The first dad-son combo in Major League Baseball history. I believe the only one since then. Maybe it'll never be replicated either. It'll be hard to be duplicated, obviously, to have that large of an age gap, but playing with one another at the Major League Baseball level at the same time. That's hard to accomplish. They did it with the Mariners. Ken Griffey Sr. was a good player himself, remember, too. But Griffey Jr., this is about him. And I want to also bring up, you said, one of the highest vote totals of all time. He actually recorded the highest vote percentage of all time in Major League Baseball Hall of Fame history. 99.3%, missing out on those 3 votes to make it unanimous. And you know what? Some voters are old and stubborn, way too old school, and they keep up these standards, which are so hard to meet, that guys don't get in or get as many votes as they should in their first time on the ballot. So maybe that affected the status of Griffey, too, being a first ballot guy, because they didn't want to make him maybe a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer. That status probably also affected their voting mentality. But what the heck were they thinking? Still, for me, in my opinion, Doc, they're jerks for doing that to him.
Well, you know how you solve this problem? Very easily. You make the vote public. These baseball writers have the ability to make their vote. It's anonymous. We never find out who voted for what, and so there's no scrutiny. Basically, you got to do a lot to become a Baseball Hall of Fame voter, and maybe one day we'll get a chance to celebrate you earning that title if you do continue your good success and your hard work. But it takes a long time to earn that accolade, and so, once you get it, it's an anonymous vote. So you have the right to leave people off or add people and make ridiculous votes, but in the end, and baseball is very particular because, I recall maybe a couple of years back where some of the writers started to talk about who they voted for and who they didn't vote for, and they kind of got shunned a little bit and by the other writers. They don't like that. They like to say, hey, we are an organization. We want to keep appropriate decorum. We don't want to, expose who's doing what. And really, for them, it's good because then, if you're one of those three writers, you would probably be facing a lot of scrutiny.
A lot of it, but deservedly so. The scrutiny is warranted right now. And you know what? For me, it's about manning up, right? Why not reveal your ballot, who you voted for, if you have the confidence in voting for these guys on your ballot? What's wrong with revealing it then?
Well,
why should you be ashamed or embarrassed of that? Now, if you're not voting Ken Griffey Jr., you're embarrassed. But the thing is, why in the heck in the first place did you not vote him in anyways, right?
Well, the thing is, if you know what the system is that it's anonymous, you can kind of maybe say, okay, I'm going to be the guy that's not going to vote him in. But if it were to be, public, then what happens is now in this Twitter day and age, you might get some comments that are really outlandish, and people will message you, email you. You may even get people that call for your job. So why expose it when you don't have to? So that's my opinion.
Too much of that, but you know what? It's a lot of old guys that don't vote these players in. They're not even on social media or on Twitter or on Facebook or anything like that. Deal with it. For me, man up. If you've been a voter for as long as a lot of these older guys have been, but guys that don't vote in anybody on their ballots per year do not deserve to be voters. And the only other reason why I could see Ken Griffey Jr. not getting in is because you believed he would be enshrined no matter what. He was an automatic in. So you voted for somebody else that would not have gotten the necessary amount of percentage to maybe even stay on the ballot. It's 5% of the vote to stay on the ballot per year. And then if you don't get that, you get eliminated, get knocked off the ballot. Lou Whitaker is a great example of it. In his first year on the ballot, had less than 5%. That's still one of the biggest snubs of all time.
Now, yeah, exactly. And to your point, looking at some writers that I'd like to question is who was voting for Alan Trammell, who was, leaving him off their ballot. So I'd like to question them and figure out what their thinking was, because in these parts of town, we're wondering, why isn't a guy like Alan Trammell being able to be voted into the Hall of Fame? I mean, everything that's come out has said that he doesn't view it as a snub. It's not a big deal. He's okay with it. But in these parts of town, I think that it's kind of a slight to that nice 84 team. And it's a slight because we feel like one of the key pieces was who had Hall of Fame caliber numbers is being left out. And I'd like to know which of the writers felt like he didn't deserve to be there. And especially those, when you can go back and compare, if you could go see who voted for Ozzie Smith.
Well, you know what? Trammell got his highest vote percentage of all time in his 15 years on the ballot.
This year?
But for him, it was 15 years of getting stiffed by the Baseball Writers Association of America.
Year after year
of getting stiffed. Finally got to 40.9%, his highest ever, like I said. But no 84 team member now is in the Hall of Fame because Trammell's eliminated from contention for getting in via this ballot, this way of getting in. Now it's about the Veterans Committee via the Expansion Era Committee, which will announce who gets in. These guys will be announced in 2020 is the year of the induction. So for Trammell, and then maybe Whitaker, maybe Jack Morris. Jack Morris will be eligible sooner for this Veterans Committee to get in via that route. But it sounds like they'll probably all have to wait until then. Trammell won't be eligible until then. So 2020 for Tram to get in at this point. But that means, like I was saying, no Whitaker, no Jack Morris, the ace of that 84 staff. The winningest starting pitcher in Major League Baseball in the 1980s for that entire decade with 162 victories as a starting pitcher. Clutch in the postseason. Won the World Series MVP in 1991 with the Minnesota Twins, a team we don't like talking about too much, right? AL Central rival. But he did get it done in the postseason in the biggest and clutchest moments. So he deserves some consideration. He got up to 65%, I believe, of the vote. So almost got in. Now he's off the ballot. Whitaker was off the ballot after his first year on the ballot. So none of those guys, that great trio of baseball players, and Tigers Lower from the 84 squad, the Bless You Boys championship team, which started off 35-5. None of those guys are in the Hall of Fame at this point, Doc. And one of those guys should get enshrined. I think Trammell's still the most likely guy to get enshrined, and that will be now. At this point, we'll have to wait for that to happen until 2020 via that Veterans Committee and that, as I said, the Expansion Era Committee. And I think he deserves it. And when you look at it, the numbers are there. You brought up Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith has a better WAR, wins above replacement. Trammell's was 70.4, but his WAR was still better than Barry Larkin, who got elected in his third year on the ballot in 2012. It's actually comparable to Derek Jeter's. Derek Jeter's is 71 point something. Trammell's 70.4. And Jeter's assumed to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. And Trammell had to wait 15 years and still didn't get in with all those years on the ballot.
All right, Vito, put yourself among, your colleagues. Why are the baseball writers considering, when they look at Alan Trammell's complete body of work, what do you think their argument may be that, he's not a guy that is worthy of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame?
Not that one great stat and not that MVP trophy to his name, which he deserved to win in 87. We've talked about it on the podcast here, Dominic and I. You brought it up. We mentioned it with you. 87, he had much better numbers than the guy that won with the Blue Jays, George Bell, who he outperformed down the stretch, and the Tigers won that division. He had better WAR, 8.2 wins above replacement, I believe it was. His highest WAR total in his career. And he
actually,
didn't get in. He should have won in 87.
To share a memory with you, I was 8 years old. I was at the late season series that they had with Toronto to help them win division. That was a good series.
One of the biggest moments in Tigers history.
I was there, and that's one of the first memories I had at Tiger Stadium. I was 8 years old, being in the crowd, the buzz, and there was nothing like attending a game at old Tiger Stadium. I mean, towards the end, it had that old funk, and it was an older, decrepit, stadium, and it definitely, we needed to move to, a more advanced stadium. But Tiger Stadium had great sight lines. It had that old baseball feel. You could pick up, peanuts and have a good time. And so that was one of my early memories, was that 87 late season series versus Toronto, where they played very well and got to win the. At that time, there was no wild card.
It was two divisions.
It was
the
two
East
divisions.
and the West. So the East was where the Tigers played in. Yeah,
and they won the division, got to the playoffs, subsequently losing to the Twins in '87 in that playoff season, in that playoff series. So you're saying that they look at their numbers and they say that he didn't produce stats league wide that would. Or accolades league wide that would say, okay, this is a guy that's in the upper echelon.
Well, yeah, he never had that 30 home run season either, but he drove in 105 during the 87 season, which is when he should have won that MVP over George Bell, as we talked about already. 8.2 WAR. And another really key point to bring up, Barry Larkin, who made it in, third year on the ballot with the Reds, won an MVP trophy with the Reds in 95. That's why he probably got into the Hall of Fame. But guess what? His WAR that year was 5.9. Trammell's in the year he didn't win the MVP and should have in 87 was 8.2. The Trammell's WAR in the year that he should have won the MVP was better than Larkin's MVP campaign of 95. That's why Larkin probably got into the Hall of Fame and in his third year on the ballot. There's a big discrepancy there in WAR.
Now,
for me, it's ludicrous that he's not in. But anyways, go on, Doc.
Yeah. Do you ascribe to the philosophy, well, if you question it, then he's not a Hall of Famer? Some people will say, you know what, if you have to even kind of have that debate, they're not a Hall of Famer right off the bat.
But I would question that with Ozzie Smith. Look at his offensive numbers. His OPS plus were so much lower than Alan Trammell's. And over the last 10 years of their careers, when you compare them head to head, here's what you can say about these two guys. Trammell was a better offensive shortstop. In fact, Smith recorded an OPS of just 700, which is, really a bench player's OPS mark. In the last 10 seasons of his career, that was, with an OPS plus below 100. If your OPS plus is below 100, you're a subpar offensive performer. And his OPS was 94 in his last 10 seasons. And he finished runner-up, by the way, in 87 as well, just like Trammell did in the American League. So Smith never won an MVP trophy, never had one to his name, and made it in his first year on the ballot. For me, it's a big shame to Tigers fans, to the Tigers franchise, that nobody from the 84 team is in the Hall of Fame at this point. And I think right now the best case scenario is that Trammell gets in via that expansion era committee in 2020. Still some years to wait for that to happen, but I think it will be such a glorious day, a joyous day for Tigers fans when he does get enshrined via that route in 2020. And maybe alongside his double play partner in Sweet Lou Whitaker. Wouldn't that be fitting if they both got in at that same time via that expansion era committee?
Yeah, that would be nice. I think it's deserved. When you look at Alan Trammell's numbers and you say, okay, how does he compare to others at the same position? They're comparable. So I believe he had a Hall of Fame career. It's a shame that he's not, but yeah, there's other opportunities, and he's handled it with such grace as he always does with the most things in terms of his career and in baseball. So he's a guy that was respectful of the game, had a great career, and we'll see what happens going forward.
Now you got something?
Yeah, I want to say that the Hall of Fame is interesting in that, baseball votes it in, the writers and things like that. You have to get 75% of the vote to get in, and they don't want, they really, the writers are in that situation where they're being a little bit judgmental, and they do factor in now off the field kind of stuff too. What's your opinion on this the steroid era? Baseball writers now are starting to kind of ease up because Mike Piazza had some issues, was a little bit questionable, and now he made it in. Guys like Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Roger Clemens, they're coming up now. Do you see the writers easing up on their stance about letting the steroid era guys in? Because I do believe these writers are very kind of trying to make up for the fact that, hey, they didn't uncover this. This was a wide-ranging, long-term issue that was going on. Where were the writers? Nobody knew about this? So I think they're trying to make up for it and trying to take the stance now of, hey, we're not going to let these guys in.
Well, I think what hurt Bonds and Clemens using the steroids when they were great players already. Why the heck did they use the roids, right? But they were jerks, too, as players on and off the field. Off the field, when dealing with the media, they were jerks all the time. Barry Bonds, hugely egotistical. His head grew as his head really, right? His ego grew as his head grew. Because, his head was huge. And
go look back at pictures of 91, right?
His neck size just increased hugely, so off the charts. And Clemens got a lot bigger, too, by the way, and could throw that fastball even when he was almost 40. Very surprising in that regard. Bonds kind of broke down there. Towards the end, though, I think we're all suspicious of the steroid usage. We know about something with that Mitchell report and everything, and that's why that tarnished their careers, their legacy. So rightfully so, they didn't get elected in the first year and haven't been, to this point, elected into the Hall of Fame. But I think they are easing up on their standards with these guys because Piazza's now in the Hall of Fame. Pudge will be, by the way, eligible next year for the Hall of Fame in the 2017 class, and he'll get a good percentage of the votes to stay on the ballot at least, so greater than that 5%. And I could see him reaching 15, 20, 25% in his first year. But Bonds and Clemens, now at this point, I could see as time goes on, as the years progress, that they get in towards the end of their tenure on the ballot.
And
I can see that happening.
And I think younger writers that come up and earn their Baseball Hall of Fame vote may also ease up and also get them higher percentages too. It's just this old guard that's just kind of taking the stance.
Once again, they're stubborn. But you know what? I'm kind of stubborn in that regard. That's where I can give them credit for being stubborn.
Would you vote them in? Would you vote Clemens, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa into the Hall of Fame if you had a vote?
Well, McGuire's off the ballot now. Sosa is someone he's been middling. I would never have voted in McGwire or Sosa. I would consider Bonds especially, and then Clemens too, because it seems like they were good without the roids, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, as a rookie phenom, for Clemens in Boston, he was all that in a bag of chips already. I mean, he was already on the verge of a Hall of Fame career, building up to that. And Barry Bonds won those MVP trophies with the Pirates, had some great seasons there under the leadership of Jim Leyland in Pittsburgh. So for me, and he was a 5-tool player back then, even really better all around as a baseball player back then than when he got to the Giants and started roiding up and got huge. So for me, I could see Bonds getting in still because of that. And yes, I would consider voting for him, but if I was a voter too, I would not have voted Bonds or Clemens in their first years, respectively, on the ballot. I would have waited. I would have made them pretty much earn it over time and work their way up, work their voting percentages up. And that's really what I feel, because I don't think they deserve to get in right away. And maybe even within 3-5 years, I would say after the 5-year mark, or maybe like on that last year of them being eligible, which is 10 years now for everybody going forward. I could see it being more likely, and for me being more likely to vote them in at that point than in their first 5 years on the ballot.
Okay, makes sense. I agree with you. I think you have fair standards, and we'll see how this goes going forward.
Well, who would you have voted? Would you have voted either of them in, or these other guys that have used roids? Because Bonds and Clemens are the most deserving of the steroid era by far. How about you?
No, I'm kind of in agreement with what you're saying. I probably would have voted for Mark McGwire just based on the fact that, the Bash brothers, he had good numbers, and he had the length of his career, and he had pretty decent numbers. But you can make the argument that he's not a Hall of Famer. But yeah, for sure, Bonds and Clemens. And you probably could leave out Sosa and McGwire. Because
they were just big bashers. They really were all-around players. And it seems like McGwire was already roiding, or in the early 90s, not right away, but early 90s, he was already roiding. And maybe Canseco and him were going behind the scenes and using those syringes. A few things. Using them for a few things. Let's just say that, those syringes.
How fascinating is it that we all kind of looked and laughed at Jose Canseco when that book came out? I read it. I had the book.
Juiced, yeah. I have it too. I've read some of it.
It's a great book. And his thesis was, under control, under the care of a caring doctor and someone who's professional. Steroids are good for you. They help.
They enhance your play. We know that.
Yeah, they enhance your play, help you recover. And his thesis was you're supposed to cycle off and on and not abuse steroids. He said, of course, if you abuse anything, it's bad for you. But he advocated, and pretty good in his book, in terms of the appropriate use of steroids can help you athletically, and he advocated for it. So, but he did tell stories and things like that, but he was the first person to out them. And now look, when we first laughed at him, now he's the person that kind of opened the floodgates in the whole steroid era.
And you know what? When you look at these guys too, how big they got and how quickly they recovered from injuries in their heydays. Well, then they broke down even more quickly towards the end of their careers because of their steroid and heavy usage of steroids. So it was a negative effect as well. Had a negative effect. Had that positive effect, like you said. Canseco said it could help you out. It did help out their bodies, growing into bigger, better ball players all around, because they already had some of that knack, that baseball acumen and talent, skill set, all that, and more. But they needed something else, they felt. And you know what? Really, for me, like with Bonds, Clemens, what it did for them is it just boosted their egos more than anything else. More than anything else they got from it, helping them out on the playing field. And with that, I think we had a good discussion there on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2016 and what voters will do going forward with their ballots and the steroid era players. So moving on now. Steven Moya, how about him falling off the top 10 prospects list based on Baseball America's list of the top 10 prospects in the Tigers farm system? Your take on that, Doc? I think it was coming.
Yeah, well, dude hit 240 with 20 home runs for AAA Toledo last year. It's a little bit surprising, but, he came off the year prior where he hit 35 home runs. Right now with the Tigers, their top prospects haven't really done significantly or done a whole heck of a lot when they've gotten up. Now they've released Bruce Fields, or they've released
Bruce
Fields,
son, yeah.
and he's now got picked up. You have these younger talented guys. They've come up like a Nick Castellanos, who's kind of taken some time. Now you say, okay, be patient, things like that. But you've also had across the league guys like, Bryce Harper, younger talent that come up and have success. Now you could say, yeah, Bryce Harper is a generational talent, but Nick Castellanos was ranked as a top prospect, and he's come up and he's kind of on the progression scale of, hey, he's making steady progress. Now he was on the trade market, a little bit of rumors speculating that he may be shopped around by the Tigers, but it's a little bit disappointing that he was left off. I do believe a guy like Steven Moya, is a talented guy that can develop into a productive player. And you got Tyler Collins. He's up here on the big club. But when you're getting talked about by being replaced by, Rayburn, if the rumors are true that the Tigers want to bring back Ryan Rayburn, who's the odd man out? It's going to be Collins. He's going to be optioned back. So, that's not really boding well when, you're trying to fight for your job over a guy like Ryan Rayburn, who doesn't really have.
Well, who's done better? He's accomplished more in his career as that platoon guy. Can hit from the one side of the plate very well, hit for power, RBI production, and more than Moya, more than Tyler Collins as well. So Steven Moya and Tyler Collins both affected, by the way, if they do add Ryan Rayburn, or if they add Chris Davis. And I want to talk about him in a few minutes, but first Moya being taken off the Tigers' top 10 prospects list. My opinion on it is that it was bound to happen after he hit 15 less home runs in AAA Toledo with 20 last year than he did in the previous season with the club's AA affiliate Erie in 2014 when he hit 35 bombs. And the 24-year-old Puerto Rico native also slugged 100-plus points less in 2015 than he did in 2014 with the Tigers' once again AA affiliate Erie, the Erie Seawolves. So he did much less positive production, much less positive work in AAA at a higher level of competition against better pitchers on an everyday basis than he did in AA in 2014. So for me, he was bound to come off, at least from the top 5, if not from the top 10, and he was taken off it completely. And there is some logic, some reasoning behind it, in my opinion, because look at what he does in the field. Very bad in the field, can't really judge a baseball. I saw him misplay one so bad at the end of this season that it made me laugh, and the entire Free Press staff inside the office at the Free Press in the sports department. So he's laughable defensively. And then offensively, his swing's way too long of a swing. He can't get around on fastballs. And if you can't get around on a fastball, you can't be a major league player or even a bench player on a major league roster. So for me, his time is nearing the end. And right now, we can officially say that he's on the verge, Doc, of being a bust. He is at this point. And he was the number one prospect based on Baseball America's top 10 Tigers prospects list going into last year's spring training season. Think about that. From one season or 1 year to the next, how much has changed for Steven Moya and his prospect status. And I got to believe right now, too, that Alavila and the Tigers could not even move him for that much in return. And that's a sad thing. For a prospect to lose that much status, to be diminished to a level of really a middle tier, not lower tier yet, but middle tier prospect that at this point, we don't expect much out of. The Tigers don't expect much out of him. He's a platoon guy now, Doc, at best, a fourth outfielder type. But you know what? Rayburn's much better than that if they add him. That's why he would be even moved further down the list of outfielders that potentially play for the Tigers one day, and, specifically in 2016. Because Collins still has an edge on him, a leg up as well on Moya. So you got Collins there. Then if they add Davis or Ryan Rayburn, those are at least one other guy. So two guys ahead of Moya in the pecking order of guys that would play corner outfield positions, the two corner outfield spots in 2016 for the Tigers.
Now you got Moya who's slipping, but on the other spectrum, you do got a guy who is considered the number one prospect in the organization that may be up by the middle of the season in Michael Fulmer. Now, he was the guy that was acquired in the Yoenis Cespedes trade last July. He's a guy that has potential to be a starter, a guy that has good stuff. Now, what his role is going to be his first couple of seasons, we're going to see. He may be put in the bullpen. They may experiment with him. But, he was 10-3 with a 2.24 ERA with the Mets and Tigers AA teams last year, and he's got a lot of hype behind him. I'm hoping that this gentleman, Fulmer, can live up to some expectations, because when you look across the Tigers minor league system, it doesn't give you much to be satisfied about or much to kind of cheer. I mean, number one pick, Derek Hill.
Back number 10, right? Only number 10 on the list.
Yeah.
That's kind of sad in itself, right?
His first year You expect some progression. You expect to see something. In his first year is injury-plagued. He doesn't do a whole lot. And so when you look across the landscape of the Tigers minor leagues, you realize that probably contributed to why Dave Dombrowski is no longer with the team. But the Tigers right now have a payroll of $189 million, and there are a lot of stars on the team. So who's going to be the young guys that are going to step up? Is it going to be, catcher McCann? Is it going to continue to be J.D. Martinez? I don't see guys, if there's going to be an injury, that can come up and just kind of continue that seamless transition. If the main Tigers roster
gets hurt,
has injuries, or guys that start off the season in a horrific slump, or something happens with the aging veterans, I'm not sure who can slip in, because you tried last year. You had Fields up, maybe too early, arguably, but he didn't do a whole heck of a lot when he was up, and he disappointed everybody, and now he's not with the team anymore.
I would say they are limited in that respect.
The minors disappointing, basically.
For replacement, reinforcements, whatever you want to call these players at the AAA, AA levels of the Tigers farm system, that you would want to replace guys that get hurt or are slumping at the major league level. They don't have many of those resources or assets at the minor league level in either AAA or AA. And Moya's not one of those guys either at this point that can be really trusted as a reinforcement, coming up for a guy that gets hurt, such as Collins or Chris Davis if they add him, or Ryan Rayburn. Then the starting pitching, they have more depth, though, in that regard, and they needed that big time. They upgraded by getting Jordan Zimmerman, by adding Mike Pelfrey. And Michael Fulmer now, having him as a midseason call-up possibility. He is that replacement option in the starting rotation for the back end of it. And he might be a midseason call-up, like I said, and a middle-of-the-rotation arm one day. Think about that. So they have a good number one prospect, a much better number one prospect than they did last year in Steven Moya. We can say that much right off the bat, because Moya already showed signs of being this guy with way too long of a swing to be a starting outfielder. And with his lack of defensive prowess on top of that, you know what? He was never really going to be a bona fide major league starting outfielder, to sum it up. So I like where they're going. They've added more depth, but they could use, you're right, Doc, they could use some more hitting prospects at this point. It seems like they've added enough now for the rotation for the pen possibly as well, but how about that position prospect part of their farm system? They don't really have a great number of hitting prospects or position specs. They need to upgrade that, and I think going forward, Alavila and company will address that.
Okay, and what you have to look at with the Tigers, too, just ahead of spring training, I think the pitchers and catchers report around the next 25 days or so in the middle of February.
The end of next month.
Yep. So that's upcoming. It's something to look forward to. Something to look forward to is, what is the final payroll going to be? Because J.D. Martinez is likely going to seek arbitration. His number is going to be set. And so once that is taking place, once his cap number is established, then you're going to go see, what is left in terms of what the Tigers can do to go out and improve the team. Right now, the speculation is about bringing back Ryan Rayburn. That's the only talk. One of the big name free agents was scooped up. He signed back with Kansas City, Alex Gordon.
We loved him.
Well, he's not with the Tigers. So you have basically one big name guy out there, Yoenis Cespedes. That's it. And, we're going to talk about Chris Davis in a few minutes. But really, the Tigers aren't going to go out and spend anymore. So now you got to go either find the diamond in the rough, or you got to find, pieces that are going to fit your ball club. So the Tigers' payroll is kind of set around 190. It's okay, but it does. When you look up and down it, you basically have a decent lineup. You have decent pitching, but you don't have the high expectations. At least I don't, going into the 2016 season like I did in the past.
Well, they don't have as much depth in their lineup anymore from 1 through 9. And they need that middle of the order bat kind of to supplant maybe, or at least to supplement what V-Mart does now. Because I don't trust him, as we've said many times now, as I have said, I don't trust him at DH going forward to be that consistent producer of runs in the middle of the order. So adding a bat such as Cespedes would be a huge upgrade. And defensively, he can get it done as well in left field. Even play some center field to sub in for Ghost and then Cameron Maben. But for me right now, the biggest rumor out there circulating, floating around, whatever you want to call it, is Chris Crash Davis from the Baltimore Orioles coming here to play for the Tigers, to play a corner outfield spot, specifically left field, because right now you got Collins, Maben, some Ghosts. We don't like it, right? There's a situation out there.
You can upgrade, definitely.
You can upgrade easily. Davis, even though he's not good defensively, a negative 14 defensive runs saved total in 2015. Not good, okay, in the outfield. Not good at all. But we're looking for his bat. His production was really good last year, but he's off and on. Year in, year out, he's not consistently that productive or all-star or MVP caliber bat in the middle of the order. He's had his off seasons. Like, well, I'll tell you right now.
And then also, too, I don't want to be wrong here, but wasn't he suspended 50 games for some, off-the-field steroid use?
He was suspended at one point for something, amphetamines or something of that sort, I believe. That hurts his reputation a little bit, too, as a hitter. Maybe that helped him out, but he hit really good last year. Let's go 3 years back now to 2013, when he was that all-star MVP caliber performer. And really, he slugged his way to compete with Miguel Cabrera. They were neck and neck for a lot of that year, but then he took the year off pretty much in 2014 and batted below the Mendoza line. And then last year, he rebounded, hit 262, 361 for OBP, 562 for slugging. His best slugging percentage since that 2013 third place MVP campaign.
See, and also the reason why his suspension came to mind, and it was due to amphetamines. He was suspended 25 games. The reason why it came to mind was in 2014, the Orioles played the Tigers in the first round, and he missed part or all of that series because of his suspension. So, a guy like that, you got to be a little bit mindful of in terms of his off-the-field choices. I mean, but the Tigers, they weren't willing to, keep who got suspended? Johnny Peralta, and they let him go.
Let him go, but he played then. They brought him back for the postseason, remember. They let him play because they needed his bat, and he played left field. Davis, another left fielder.
Arguably, do you think they should have kept Peralta?
Oh, God, yeah. At this point, look at his bat, what he's done with the Cardinals. He's been their best pickup in how many years? Since Matt Holliday, probably. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I think it was a mistake, and Dave D probably regrets in the back of his head, even though he's with the Bo Sox now. Maybe one of his biggest regrets, too. But I don't think it was based on talent with Peralta. It was on that
St. Louis unloaded.
The money and the suspension that happened to him. I think if Peralta didn't get suspended, they would have re-upped with Peralta there in Motown under Dave D's leadership. But once again, Davis, 53 bombs, league leading, 138 RBIs in 2013, league leading as well. And total bases, 370. That's astounding for one season. And the OPS above 1,000. That's when you're an MVP caliber performer. And he brought that back into play. He came back to fruition with that kind of a all-star and MVP caliber performance in 2015, where he was this dominant slugger once again. And he strikes out a ton, but he produces the long ball, man. I mean, 47 this past season. Even in a down year, and 2014 was his worst campaign on record, really, since being an Oriole in a full season with the Orioles. So I kind of discount that year a little bit, but you still have to take it into account a little bit at the same time because it was only 2 years ago at this point. But I wanted to look back at another one of his down years at the Orioles in 2012, kind of a down year. Well, it wasn't comparable to 2013 or 2015, but in 2012, even when he was worth, under 2 wins above replacement, which is a measuring mark for how good or how successful a guy really is all around as a player. Well, even in that season, when he was worth below 2 WAR, he hit 33 bombs and had a slugging percentage of .501 and had an OPS of 827. Whenever you're above that 800 threshold for on-base plus slugging percentage, that means you're an all-star performer. And once again, could be mixed into the consideration for MVP in your respective league. So he did that in 2012, followed it up with that 2013 great campaign in which he finished third for the most valuable player in the American League. 2014 was his worst season. Very dismal, once again below the Mendoza line, and only with the 704 OPS. And that is stunning in itself after what he did the year before, but also that's a stark contrast in being good one year and bad the next. And that kind of scares me a little bit. But then he rebounded last year. But at the end of the day, you still have to worry about how much money does this guy want? And how much money does he truly warrant now? After really being on and off, hot and cold since 2012, Doc. Because we don't want the case of where we have, the Giants are a team that wins every other year. Davis is a player that's good every other year. I don't think the Tigers want to invest in him long term when that's the case, Doc.
No, I agree with you. I agree. Spot on analysis. I like Chris Davis. I think he can do something. I mean, here's the thing. When you're around hitters, it also not only what you did in previous seasons, but the fit here. I mean, you could spot him in a nice spot in that lineup. When you got potentially Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez, J.D. Martinez, you can, and a guy like McCann benefited from that, you can get, protected in that lineup where you see more good pitches, and a guy with natural talent like Chris Davis could benefit from being inserted into that lineup and, not getting the brunt of, the best pitches because the opposing pitchers are going to want to avoid, they're going to want to avoid serving up meatballs to the big hitters. And so you can slot him in there and then he'll be put in a position where he can have success. So he might benefit from being inserted into this lineup, but in the end, I don't think they'll add him.
And you know what? It's also about the budget, the salary, all that you have to devote to him over the long term. Like I said, I don't think he's worthy of that long-term investment. And you have to also take into account, remember J.D. Martinez on the verge of signing a big long-term extension. Well, how much money will he get? Well, a lot of it. And guess what? He's more worthy of it at this point because he's better defensively in the outfield.
I got an interesting question for you. Okay, so now J.D. Martinez is going to hit arbitration. So when they do arbitration, they put forth basically everything on the table. So we know the stats. We know what his agent's going to put out, big-time numbers in the prime of his career. Look what he's done consistently. So now if you're the Tigers and you're trying to kind of limit the salary, try to keep it down, what would you present as being the cons for JD Martinez? What would what if you're the arbiter and so obviously you'd be the Tigers. What would you kind of throw out there as to say, hey, well, now compared to maybe so and so or what we've seen, this is maybe some reasons why we don't want to up your salary. What would you present as an argument against JD Martinez?
Good topic here. No sustained longevity as a productive hitter at the major league level. 2 years of it. And his first year with the Tigers, remember, in 2014, was not a full season with the Tigers. It wasn't because he was, remember, cut, let go. He was in AAA in Toledo with the Tigers, then was brought up, and he killed it when he came onto the scene. But 2 years, really a year and a half when you take into account that he wasn't on the Tigers' major league roster the full entire way in 2014. So that's what I would present to JD Martinez as a member of the Tigers arbitration staff that is trying to negotiate a lower term and value in arbitration for JD. Because I don't think he's, like we've talked about, if you have to give him more, in the future, more than 20 mil a year, even maybe north of 15 mil a year, you don't want to do that right now. You want to bring it down to as low of a level as you possibly can, and you always do with any player out there, but especially a guy that's not totally proven yet. So remember that, he's not totally proven. What would you, though, present to JD right now and his agent if you were the Tigers?
Yeah, that's a tough thing. That's really something I really don't know because he's got good numbers. I feel like
it's only 2 years, but we think he's come onto the scene. He's emerged as an all-star, and he was an all-star. So
you could say the batting average kind of dipped at the end of last year. It was a little bit inconsistent in terms of, once he got hot, he was very productive, but he had a dip in the season and things like that. But there's not too many things. I mean, maybe you go with the defense a little bit, but he's strong. He's strong.
A Gold Glove candidate. He was that good. He got that much better in right field. So for me, there's not much out there that you can really say is a negative about JD Martinez right now.
Stump me. Yeah, exactly. The teams and players are going to begin exchanging preliminary numbers this Friday. And
let's go and cover. Let's go inside the negotiating room.
Yeah, the interesting part is, though, the Tigers have not determined a player's salary through arbitration since Avila got there back in 2002. So they try to avoid arbitration as much as possible, and that's what the report says. So
they always avoid arbitration kind of deals with players. They don't like having to deal with that. They avoid it at all costs, and they have successfully under the leadership of. But now it's Al Avila, a new guy. We'll see what he does. But
that's what fascinates me is that in an arbitration meeting, the team tries to throw out stuff and information to kind of discount
to downplay what the guy has done. Yeah.
So imagine you're sitting there and the Tigers are like, well, your defense could be improved compared to so and so. You're you're ranked this bit at your position, and you're like, dang, is that how you feel about me? It's strictly business. So I would just
might feel slighted. I get what you're saying. You never know how a player might feel and maybe how he takes it, maybe gets offended by it. But JD, hey, you're going to get paid handsomely one day by the Tigers, so take it for what it's worth.
Well, going into it, you're going into a meeting where your boss is trying to say, I don't want to pay you this much. This is why. So you're like, oh, is that how you really feel? Strictly business, but it's always fascinating to look at arbitration meetings, stuff like that. But Tigers don't do it. I think they'll take care of JD.
They'll work out a deal because they trust in his value right now. They know they need him going forward because of the fact that, hey, V-Mart's not the same player. Miguel's getting older. He's banged up all the time now, it seems like, on a consistent basis. And then they're not going to add another impact bat like Cespedes or
they might bring
Davis,
up, well, you were released by Houston just free and clear. We were able to attain
Bringing up the past, huh?
We were able to attain you relatively cheap, and, we didn't have to give up for you, so your overall ranking is a little bit lower. So,
And we gave you your best chance to play at the major league level so far. Remember that, too. We gave you
your success is due to being in the lineup with Miggy and V-Mart, and you received this training. Without V-Mart, we don't expect. They put a little presentation up without
like a pie graph or something up with his numbers.
Without Victor Martinez, we expect 20 home runs and 18.
They could do an Excel spreadsheet with the numbers that they think he would have had if he didn't have V-Mart protecting him and showing him the way. And Miguel Cabrera, another big influence on JD, but having some fun with it, he will get paid and handsomely, I believe, as well in the near future, maybe as well.
I would say this is a guy you could really showcase, and you want to try to get a good number because if he has another 35-plus home run season, he's breaking the bank.
And that's why we've talked about it, about whether or not to sign him right now, because you want to get him under contract for the long term right now because you don't want to have to invest in him long term when he's already hitting 40 home runs. When he does that, the 40 home run thing, okay, that's big time production stuff where you get paid handsomely and probably north of 15 mil, if not north of 20 mil. That's a scary thought for the Tigers when they already have Miguel Cabrera under contract for the long term and JV at big contract numbers. And with that, we'll take a quick commercial break here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And when I return, we'll discuss some Hall of Fame election results with the man, the godfather of fantasy baseball, Lenny Melnick. Looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan quarterback John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and the best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to topcatteamsales.com. Once again, the website is topcatteamsales.com. Also, remember to follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat. Now with me on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is the legendary fantasy baseball man, the godfather of fantasy baseball himself, Lenny Melnick of Sirius XM and the owner/founder of Lenny Melnick FantasySports.com. Lenny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing better than the Detroit Tigers, that's for sure, but I think the Tigers will eventually be better than me.
Well, I hope so. That's the plan for the Tigers organization going forward under that leadership of Al Avila. So making some right moves, but first and foremost, Lenny, let's dive into the 2016 Hall of Fame class of Major League Baseball. And Ken Griffey, we knew he would get in, but he finished 3 votes shy of a unanimous Hall of Fame selection, receiving 99.3% of the vote in this year's Hall of Fame election. So tell me, what do you think about the voters who failed to include him on their ballots? And what in the world could they have been thinking?
Well, I haven't really heard who they were or what they were thinking in their own voices, so I will tell you what I think. And it seems to me that the Hall of Fame balloting has gone in so many different directions and so many different approaches. And with the steroid guys, you know, Clemens and Piazza until now, and Bonds and Bagwell, all these guys that normally would have been shoo-in Hall of Famers years ago, still on a lot of people's ballots, it's clogging the ballots. And in order to get some of the names on there that you really want to get, the position that they may have taken was Ken Griffey Jr. doesn't need my vote. So I'm going to put in somebody who is marginal. I'll put in a Tim Raines. I'll put in a Kurt Schilling or somebody like that, because Griffey doesn't need me, but these guys do. And, of course, you got to – so I think that's what it is. I think the limit of 10 per customer is ridiculous. Why can't it be 15? Why can't it just be if they deserve to be on it, they're on it? So I think that's the only list. Nobody could say that Griffey was not an all-star. I heard one guy who mentioned that he did not vote for Griffey for one, only because he gave the reason, and it could be the most ridiculous reason in town. He said Ken Griffey did one thing that he did not like, and that was he didn't devote himself to Major League Baseball 100%. And that sounds a little crazy. Griffey with the hat backwards and the big smile and the whole thing. But if you take a look at the end of his career, the last couple of years, he got a little out of shape. He got a little pudgy up the middle. And this particular writer said, you know what? That's not dedicating yourself to the game. That's not taking those years and saying, I'm going to be the best that I could be. He got out of shape. He was overweight. And for that reason, he's not 100%. He's 99%.
But don't you think Griffey devoted himself to the game? There's no doubt about that, in my opinion, Lenny.
Well, yeah, but if you get out of shape, then how much are you devoting 100%? I mean, we're being quibbly now. He still may have produced on the field, but the fact that he was not in the best shape of his life indicates that maybe he could have done better. So if you want to get sticky about it, I mean, I'd be hard-pressed for any jerk to come up with a real reason why you wouldn't vote for him. So in this make-believe world of making reasons, that's not plausible, but it's a reason.
If we wanted to quibble, that could be a reason. Not a lot of validity to it, but hey.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, that's his opinion. Anyway, so Griffey Jr., the first number 1 overall pick ever enshrined now, going to be enshrined into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, being elected this year as part of the 2016 class. Now, Mike Piazza, the lowest round pick ever to be elected into the Hall. What did you think about his selection, and does it open the floodgate now for other alleged steroid users to make it into the Hall of Fame?
Well, there are some that say the way the Hall of Fame voting has gone, people don't know what direction. Some people say steroids, and I'm not voting him because I heard something from somebody who said something to somebody else, or whatever. The innuendos, the behind-the-scenes talk about Piazza being on steroid, Mike Bagwell being on it, and other guys. It's what, without specific proof, I'll take the position in two different ways. Number one, I say if you want to continue this ridiculous Hall of Fame voting, nobody should be disallowed into the Hall of Fame because of a rumor or a whisper. Okay, if you don't have proof, give the guy the benefit of the doubt, put him in, and then when you find proof later on, you take him out. I mean, why can't you take him out? Why can't you have a ceremony saying, well, today we unfortunately have discovered that Mike Piazza broke the rules, so we are officially removing him from the Hall of Fame. Or take the position that the Hall of Fame is totally outdated, and it's more of it should be more of a museum. Yes, glorifying all the great accomplishments in the game and everything that has happened, and also talking about the negative parts of the game, talking about the history of the game, whatever it has been. So, you can go two different ways. I think it's time for a revised edition of the Hall of Fame, and even if you want to make it the Museum of Baseball, it's just crazy that you don't allow Pete Rose in, but you allow all the artifacts that are on display about Pete Rose. Something doesn't make sense there.
So if you revised it then, if you had it your way, would Barry Bonds and Clemens and other guys and their like make it into the Hall of Fame, Lenny?
Well, look, you can't. People are closing their eyes. Like you don't want to tell your kids what happened. Why don't you put Barry Bonds in there and say, but all right, he may have been using performance-enhancing drugs that got him to this massive home run level. All right, Roger Clemens may have been using it. Mike Piazza may. Put him in, tell the story, and you know something? It's going to happen anyway. People are going to use their own judgment and have their own opinions about all these guys, whether they're in or not. That's what's going to happen. So you might as well open your eyes, start telling your kids and your grandchildren the truth about baseball. It's been going on for years that we've kind of kept our mouths shut. We don't want to take away it's all about baseball. I'll tell you something. If it wasn't for the numbers that we cherish in baseball, I don't think anybody would really care about the PEDs. But it tarnishes the numbers. You can't compare. You can hardly compare the eras. Now you just can't compare. You don't know if a guy's on the drugs. Or how many pitchers were on it? How many pitchers were not? What was the advantage to the pitchers? There's so many different stories. Tell the story. Don't try to hide anything. And let's show all these youngsters who walk through the Hall of Fame what baseball really has been about.
Well, let's then showcase the glory days of the Tigers then. The 84 championship team, the Bless You Boys team. No members of the Hall of Fame from that championship squad. Made a 35-5 start, the greatest in Major League Baseball history, yet nobody still elected into the Hall from that squad, including Alan Trammell, who I believe should be in the Hall of Fame, and perhaps was the biggest travesty of the voters in 2016, him not getting into the Hall after 15 years of being stiffed by the Baseball Writers Association of America. But that's my take, Lenny. What is yours on Alan Trammell and the likes of Jack Morris and Lou Whitaker not being enshrined into the Hall of Fame?
They're all basically the same kind of players. Maybe Whitaker may be just a tad behind. You see, I played fantasy baseball in their era, in the Jack Morris era, and the Alan Trammell. Yeah, they were big-time players, also with Luke Whitaker. But they were never among the highest valued players. Morris, a tremendous competitor, tremendous pitcher. But did he match up in his day to guys like, just go down the list, Pedro Martinez, Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux, Randy Johnson, these are guys definite. He's on the cusp. And perhaps Morris is just another one of those guys who got clogged up because people only were allowed 10 to 15 votes, and they started backing up with the steroid era. I'll say the same thing about Trammell. The thing about at least Morris had something to his record that kind of was flashy. His playoff record was pretty good. Alan Trammell was steady. He was among the best in the business, but he didn't have that one glaring thing that jumped off the page. He didn't steal 40 bases. He didn't steal 35. He didn't hit 35 home runs. He didn't have that one thing that you say, Trammell's a short thing. Same thing with Whitaker. So, and I think there are other travesties, including, I'll tell you, when you're ready, I'll tell you the biggest travesty of all. And nobody will even know this guy. How's that? So, but yeah, Trammell, Whitaker, and I'm glad you didn't say Bill Freehand, by the way, because if you rank his numbers against catchers, he may be pretty close. But get Trammell, Whitaker, and Morris. These are some of the guys just trapped in the fact that the steroid guys have stayed on the ballot, and I don't think sports writers have enough balance.
Back to Trammell really quick. If he would have won that MVP in '87, when I believe he should have over George Bell of the Blue Jays, would he be in the Hall of Fame right now?
I got news for you. I don't think a lot of the modern day. I don't know how many modern day writers are even aware how good Alan Trammell was. I mean, there are some players that just deserve to be in there, but for one reason or another, the sports writers, in all honesty, they just may not be smart enough to understand how good Alan Trammell was in his day. And he was certainly a top 5 shortstop for sure. Top 3, he may even had some seasons he was the number 1. He was in the Ripken era. Okay, that may have overshadowed him a little bit. Barry Larkin played in that era. So there were a couple of good shortstops, bona fide. You take the argument of Ozzie Smith, who, so good. Was he close to a first ballot, second ballot? I mean, Omar Vizquel is just as good as Ozzie Smith, except for if you take into account, Gold Gloves. One had 13. Ozzie had 13. I think Vizquel had 9 to 11. Vizquel had more runs scored in his career than Ozzie Smith. He had 10-point higher batting average. His fielding percentage. So there's a lot of things that go on in the balloting, and certainly Ozzie was a very popular player. But I'm afraid the Tiger players, for the most part, played in a little bit of obscurity up there in Detroit, and I think the Hall of Fame ballot shows it. Although Al Kaline didn't have a problem getting it.
No, but he was Mr. Tiger. Trammell was Tram. Lou Whitaker was Sweet Lou, but I guess they weren't Mr. Tiger himself, Al Kaline,
right.
too. But I wanted to ask you, tell me this, will Tram make it in via the expansion era committee when he's first eligible for that committee, or to get in via that committee? What do you think about that?
You know what? I don't know how that committee is. It the good old boy committee, or are they taking a look? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what confuses me. There's a player, happens to be a shortstop, who I think was better than Alan Trammell and hasn't even been mentioned in years. People haven't squawked about it. People don't get it. And his name is Maury Wills. You know who Maury Wills is? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I do a little bit. I looked him up on Baseball Reference, so that's where I go to
Maury
look up my
Wills.
players.
I got to tell you something. Prior to 1959, if you stole 29 bases, you had a good chance to win the stolen base title. Then Louis Aparicio comes along. He makes the Hall of Fame. But then this kid named Maury Wills comes along, and he steals 90 bases, 100 bases. And not only that, but he had 10, 11 years of greatness, 2 Gold Gloves, so you can't say he was a bad fielder. And more, but he changed the game. From 29 stolen bases, he created a whole new game of baseball, including he was so instrumental in changing the game that TV coverage changed, and the split-screen TV picture came into effect so that people could watch the pitcher and watch Maury Wills at first base taking his lead. That's how effective he was. And I'm on a mission to try to find the Dodger record when Maury Wills got on base in the first inning. He shook up the pitcher, he got the crowd into the game, and I'll bet you the Dodgers have a phenomenal record when Wills got on first base in the first inning. So there's a guy, a shortstop like Trammell, who could very well get buried. So you just never know how these guys are going to vote. But Trammell should be in there, and certainly Maury Wills should have been in a long time ago. But the good old boys didn't even vote him in, and that shocks me.
Stubborn guys, right? Voting these players into the Hall of Fame, and I think we see that here and there. And don't you hope that some of these guys kind of go by the wayside and get rid of their voting privileges?
Well, certainly, you know what? There are a lot of guys that don't even pay attention, and I don't know who they are. I'm not gonna. I just don't. But you take into consideration that they're sports writers, that they cover, and a lot of them are beat writers. Well, just because you're a beat, I mean, how many times do you get a chance to see the other players if you're always in the press box watching the Tiger games? All right. Do you watch the other teams on TV? I don't think so. Yeah, American League players will come into Detroit. But what about their knowledge of the National League players and the other way around? I don't think there's a perfect way. I don't think letting the fans vote is the right way either. But I do think that we have to be a little bit more picky in picking out the sports writers who vote. There are quite a few, and I think they already have. I forget the amount. There was over 100 fewer ballots cast this year because of the fact that the Hall of Fame decided to cut back on some of the credentials. So I think that's good. And I'll tell you something, whether it be 200 people voting or I'd rather have the top 50 guys who really covered the game and really saw the players. If anybody sees the players, well, that's all I want. Look, I didn't care if you didn't like Albert Bell. You got to be kidding me. You put them in for their merits, not for your likes or dislikes, and most important, weed out the sports writers that aren't paying attention.
And with that, Lenny, thanks for all the old school and new school insight today on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. You have a good one.
You too, kiddo.
All right, I'll talk to you. Thank you to Lenny Melnick for joining us as usual, the godfather of fantasy baseball. Always great stuff from him, Doc.
Yeah, you told me that he's kind of a mentor to you, and I checked out after his first appearance his website, and wow, a wide variety of knowledge regarding fantasy baseball and a lot of other fantasy sports as well. What's that website again for those that want to check it out?
Lenny Melnick, fantasysports.com. I actually have an article on there. I might be writing some more pieces. He's a good guy, really helping me out. He's a guide to me, a mentor, as he said. So follow him on that website at, once again, Lenny Melnick, fantasysports.com.
And I want to give you kudos for your Freep article covering the UDM game. Very good stuff, a good read, a thorough breakdown of the game. Who was the opponent again, and what was the kind of storyline?
Detroit played Valparaiso.
Yep.
First place on the line, Valparaiso killed Detroit in the second half. Really, in the first half, they were up big. And the second half, Detroit made it a game to start off in the second half. Anton Wilson had a huge game, 23 points, I believe it was. Good from three-point shooting. But for Valparaiso, it was the story of Alec Peters, one of the first-team All-Horizon League favorites. And a favorite along with Kate Felder for Player of the Year in the Horizon League.
So at Callahan, because it's been a minute, and I'm looking forward to getting out there, watch some more UDM games since I am an alum. Got my master's degree.
You should be showing up, man. The team's good this year.
So when you cover the game, is it on the press row by the court, or is it up? Where do the press sit at Callahan Hall?
Press row near the court. It's an above, a raised platform a little bit for the press, and you can see the action mid-court. Very nice vantage point at UDM, at historic Callahan Hall. Yeah,
and great sight lines anywhere there. I remember going there back at graduate school, and great atmosphere to watch college basketball. Very close sights, and you can have a good time. And the players are accessible, nice dudes. You can see them around campus, and I love my time at UDM. It was a great campus life, and you always get the chance to see good quality basketball. Division I.
Were you around when they made the NCAA tournament, too?
I believe
they did make it twice
right
to the NCAA tournament when they had my guy, Rashad Phillips, who's been on my shows in the past, not on this podcast per se, but he's been on, good friend of the pod, of my shows in the past. So great teams back then under the leadership of Perry Watson, a great coach for UDM. Yeah, no, UDM basketball is very, get out there at McNichols campus. Callahan Hall's great place to go. Affordable tickets, so definitely check it out. You can meet our guy Vito and tell him how great he's doing on the podcast, and maybe you can request anything from him regarding some future pieces that you may do or things like that. So Vito's an accessible guy. He's a good dude, and you'll see him around town for sure. I know it. I'll be around. And I'm always friendly, always personable, and hey, a big game for UDM. Remember, this Saturday against OU, big in-state rivalry, part of that Metro Series now. OU's kicked our behinds, UDM's behinds in the past, in recent memory at least. Kate Felder, really good player for OU. They can score 100 points. UDM can do it, though, too. So I can see a high-scoring game, high-octane offenses going head-to-head. And it could go down the wire. It really could go down to the wire, though, too. But OU right now is probably a notch better with Kate Felder as their go-to player, leading scorer, all that good stuff. I mean, he scored 30 against MSU, right? It was 30, I believe, 30-something against MSU at the Palace. Went to overtime. He fouled out early. That knocked OU out of the game because of that. But when he's out there, man, they're one of the best teams in those mid-major conferences and in the Horizon League. So UDM OU will be at the top of the conference by the end of the season too, in my opinion.
So Vito, where can people find you and your work? I know you're doing a lot of different things. You're a free contributor to the Free Press. Great work there. Where else can people find Vito Chirco?
You can find my stories also at Detroit Athletic Company, okay, or DetroitAthleticCo.com, I believe it is. So for the blog of Detroit Athletic Company. For the Free Press, I contribute some prep sports-related stuff. And then also I've covered UDM now 3 times this season, 3 times for the men's basketball team this season, to be specific. And then also doing this podcast here under the lovely umbrella of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, hosted as well on DetroitSportsNation.com, and Top Cat Sales on social media for @TeamTopCat.
So you're the guy behind the Team Top Cat who's blowing up my Twitter page.
Oh, yeah.
That's all good.
Well, I'm going to do it because you give me the feedback, the
That's
kickback,
right.
and I love it. I love the positive interactions, and that's how it should be between two people working together. And Top Cat is sponsor now of Detroit Sports Podcast and Network and of Chirco and Company, Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. to be exact. So a good relationship, good working relationship going forward with the Top Cat Sales Coach of the Week as well being launched this week for the high school basketball season, which you can check out on DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
Thank you, Vito. Great podcast. Looking forward to upcoming podcasts breaking down the news and notes regarding the Detroit Tigers, Major League Baseball. You know, spring training is coming around the corner. Pitchers and catchers are going to report. A lot of people to watch and look after, and we'll definitely break it down here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. See ya.
Talk to you next week.